Jack Thompson had just moved to the quiet town of Brooksville for a new job. Excited about his fresh start, he worked late at his new office, trying to make a good impression. As he packed up to head home, he checked Google Maps for the quickest route. The app showed him a shortcut, an unusually wide road that cut through the outskirts of town. Curious but eager to get home, Jack decided to take it. As he turned onto the shortcut, he noticed the road was surprisingly empty despite its width and smooth surface. It was rush hour, yet not a single car was in sight. Jack furrowed his brow, puzzled. The silence was eerie, broken only by the hum of his engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The road seemed endless, flanked by dense, dark trees that cast long shadows across the asphalt. The further he drove, the more uneasy he felt. It was as if the road had a life of its own, stretching out endlessly ahead of him. He adjusted his rearview mirror, expecting to see another car, but the road behind him was just as deserted. Without warning, his car radio crackled to life, emitting static and strange, garbled noises. Jack frowned and turned it off, but the unsettling sounds continued. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the road, but his grip on the steering wheel tightened. Then, out of nowhere, a broken branch fell from the trees above, crashing onto his windshield. Jack swerved violently, his heart racing, barely managing to keep the car on the road. The windshield was cracked but still intact. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. A few moments later, the temperature inside the car dropped suddenly, and his breath became visible in the air. Jack shivered, glancing at the temperature gauge, which showed normal. The air around him seemed to grow heavy, pressing down on him. As he drove on, the road seemed to come alive with strange phenomena. The shadows among the trees twisted and danced, forming shapes that looked almost human. He saw flickering lights in his peripheral vision, like distant lanterns swaying in the dark. His car's headlights flickered, casting eerie, shifting beams on the road ahead. Jack's heart pounded as he fumbled for his phone and dialed 911. The operator answered quickly, her voice calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency? Jack explained his situation, his voice trembling. The operator listened intently, then her tone changed, filled with urgency. Sir, you need to get off that road immediately. It's known for paranormal activities. Keep driving until you reach the main road and do not hang up. I'll stay on the line with you. Jack's blood ran cold. What do you mean, paranormal activities? This road was built during World War II for airplane landings, which is why it's so wide. A few years ago, a cult group committed mass suicide here. Since then, strange things have happened, and no one uses this road anymore. Jack's mind raced. He pressed the gas pedal harder, desperate to reach the main road. The bizarre phenomena intensified. He saw shadowy figures standing on the roadside, their faces obscured by darkness. The air filled with a low, mournful hum, like distant chanting. Just keep going, the operator urged. You're almost there. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack saw the lights of the main road ahead. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the temperature returned to normal. He veered onto the main road, breathing a sigh of relief as he joined the stream of cars. Thank you, Jack said, his voice shaky with gratitude. You're safe now, the operator replied. But remember, never take that shortcut again. Jack drove home, the weight of the night's events pressing heavily on his mind. He couldn't shake the images of the shadowy figures and the eerie phenomena he had witnessed. That road, a relic of wartime and tragedy, was a place he would never forget, a haunted shortcut he would never take again. No one ever walked down Holloway Street after dark. The narrow road, flanked by decaying Victorian houses, had a reputation that made even the bravest souls shiver. It was said that the street whispered secrets, and those who heard them never returned the same. Some never returned at all. It started innocently enough, with flickering streetlights and odd sounds that could be easily dismissed as the wind. But as the years passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The residents of Holloway Street moved away one by one until only a single house remained occupied, standing as a solitary sentinel against the encroaching darkness. The Johnson family moved in, unaware of the street's sinister reputation. They found the old house charming in a quaint, haunted sort of way. The realtor, desperate to make a sale, had conveniently omitted the street's history from their discussions. The family, eager for a fresh start, ignored the peeling paint and the eerie quiet that settled around them like a fog. Their first night was peaceful enough, but it didn't take long for the street to reveal its true nature. It began with the whispers. Soft at first, just a faint murmur that could easily be mistaken for the wind rustling through the trees. But as the night deepened, the whispers grew clearer, each word cutting through the silence like a knife. "Come, join us." Alice, the Johnsons' teenage daughter, was the first to hear them. She lay in bed, the moonlight casting long shadows on her bedroom walls. She thought she was dreaming when she heard the voices, but when she sat up, the whispers grew louder, echoing around her room. "Come follow!" She crept out of bed and peered through her window. Holloway Street stretched out before her, bathed in an unnatural glow. The streetlights flickered erratically, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. She could see figures at the far end of the street, just beyond the reach of the light. They beckoned to her, their ghostly hands waving her closer. Alice turned away, her heart pounding. She tried to wake her parents, but they slept soundly, oblivious to the voices that seemed to fill the house. Desperate and frightened, she hid under her blankets, praying for the whispers to stop. The next morning, Alice told her parents about the whispers, but they dismissed her fears as a bad dream. "Just your imagination," her mother said, ruffling her hair. "New house, new sounds. You'll get used to it." But Alice knew what she had heard, and she could see the fear in her parents' eyes despite their reassurances. They had heard something too. She was sure of it. As night fell again, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Alice's parents began to hear them too, and soon the whole family was gripped by a terror they couldn't explain. The whispers spoke of dark things, of lives lost and secrets buried. They seemed to come from the very walls of the house, from the street itself, seeping into their minds like poison. Desperation set in. The Johnsons tried to leave, but Holloway Street wouldn't let them go. Every attempt to flee was met with inexplicable obstacles. The car wouldn't start, the phone lines were dead, and even the door seemed to resist their touch. One by one, they succumbed to the whispers. Alice was the first to disappear. Her parents woke one morning to find her bed empty, her window open. There were no signs of a struggle, just the soft echo of the whispers growing fainter as they called her away. Her father was next, driven mad by the voices that filled his head. He wandered out into the street one night, never to return. Alice's mother was left alone, her mind unraveling as the whispers closed in. When the police finally arrived, alerted by worried relatives who hadn't heard from the family in weeks, they found the house empty. Holloway Street stood silent and still, the whispers gone. But the air was thick with the feeling of dread, and the officers couldn't shake the sense that they were being watched. The Johnsons were never found. Their house, like the others before it, fell into disrepair, another victim of Holloway Street's curse. And the whispers returned, waiting for the next family to venture down the street that no one walked after dark. Tommy had lost track of time playing with his friends. The summer days had grown shorter, and evening came swiftly now. He waved goodbye to his friends and started the walk home, his backpack slung over one shoulder. As he turned the corner onto Blackwood Lane, he felt a shiver run down his spine. The street was infamous in their small town, whispered about among the locals for its history of paranormal incidents. Blackwood Lane was narrow and lined with ancient gnarled trees whose branches intertwined overhead, blocking out most of the fading daylight. The air was colder here, a sharp contrast to the warm summer evening he had just left behind. Tommy quickened his pace, eager to get home before darkness fully set in. As he walked, he heard a faint rustling in the bushes. He glanced over but saw nothing. The wind, he told himself, though the air was unnaturally still. The sky darkened rapidly, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out towards him. Suddenly, he felt a chill, like icy fingers brushing against his ear. He spun around, heart pounding, and saw a white figure standing far behind the trees. It was tall and thin, its form barely distinguishable from the shadows. He rubbed his eyes, thinking it might be a trick of the light. But when he looked again, the figure was still there, watching him. Panic surged through him, and he broke into a run. The branches above seemed to close in tighter, and the temperature dropped even further. He could hear footsteps now, echoing his own, though when he glanced back, no one was there. Tommy stumbled over a root protruding from the uneven pavement and fell hard, scraping his hands and knees. He lay there for a moment, catching his breath, and then he heard it, a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from all directions at once. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, filled with a sadness that pierced his heart. He struggled to his feet, feeling dizzy and disoriented. The street seemed to stretch on forever, the end nowhere in sight. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, and strange, distorted shapes flickered at the edges of the trees. Tommy's breaths came in short, ragged gasps. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. His vision blurred, and the world around him started to spin. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the white figure, now much closer, reaching out towards him with long, bony fingers. Hours later, his parents set out to find him. It was well past dinner time, and Tommy never stayed out this late. They called his friends, but no one had seen him since he left. Panic set in as they drove through the streets, calling his name. When they reached Blackwood Lane, a feeling of dread washed over them. They parked the car and stepped into the cold, darkened street. The trees loomed overhead, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "Tommy!" his mother called, her voice trembling. They walked further down the lane, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Then they saw him, lying on the ground, unconscious but otherwise unharmed. His mother rushed to his side, cradling his head in her lap while his father checked for a pulse. Relief flooded through them when they found it, steady and strong. Tommy's eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion and fear. He clung to his mother, tears streaming down his face. The figure. It was right there,